June 6, 1944, 12,000 feet above the blacked-out fields of Normandy. You can almost feel the freezing wind whipping through the open doors of the C-47 transports. Hear the nervous shouts of men checking their parachutes one last time. The moon is hidden behind heavy clouds, flak bursts below like deadly fireworks, and the faint, distant rumble of German artillery shakes the air. Private First Class James O'Connor grips his rifle, teeth chattering. Beside him, Lieutenant Richard Winters peers out, trying to spot the drop zone through a blur of darkness. "We'll be scattered," he mutters almost to himself. The C-47 jolts violently, a shell explodes nearby, tearing through canvas and wood. Men scream. A chute opens too early, another too late. Below the fields of Normandy are a patchwork of hedgerows, roads, and rivers. The plan was precise. Land on DZO near St. Miraglais, secure the bridges, block German armor from reaching Utah and Omaha beaches. But precision is gone. Clouds swallow formations. Radios fail. Officers vanish into the night. Some men plummet into trees. Others crash into orchards, tangled in branches. Corporal Anthony Rossi lands in a ditch, rifle lost, rifleman buddy gone. He curses under his breath but rises. He is alone, but he's not helpless. Around him, scattered figures begin to regroup. The nightmare of disorganization is total. Yet amidst the chaos, something extraordinary begins to flicker. Small groups, sergeants and corporals stepping into roles meant for officers, start moving with purpose. They map the roads in their minds, counting hedgerows, listening for the thrum of distant vehicles. They improvise. They adapt. Up in the Allied command tent, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower sifts through conflicting reports, numbers blinking on a map. Scattered, most units off target, his face tightens. Panic is palpable in the room. Could it be over before it even began? But then, somewhere in the darkness, a sergeant shouts orders to a dozen men. They check weapons, nod to one another, and vanish into the night. A bridge, just one bridge. It is lightly defended. If they can hold it, even for a few hours, the invasion might survive. The first shots ring out. German sentries fall silent. Others scramble, confused. A single, disorganized American group has struck first. And somehow, against every expectation, the impossible has begun. The first firefight is nothing like training exercises back in the States. Bullets ricochet off stone walls, splinter hedgerows, and the occasional armored car. You can almost taste the smoke, smell the wet earth and cordite mingling in the cold night air. Lieutenant Winters, now separated from most of his men, crouches behind a broken wall, peering through the darkness. His radio is dead, but his mind races. Every hedge, every farmhouse, every small road could hide a German patrol. Yet he knows the mission: capture the bridges. Without those crossings, the tanks on Utah Beach are trapped. The entire invasion could stall before it begins. Meanwhile, Sergeant John Steele has landed on the church steeple of St. Miraglais, dangling awkwardly as paratroopers flail around him on the streets below. His men are nowhere in sight. Alone, wounded, terrified, Steele's instinct is survival and leadership. He begins directing scattered soldiers down the cobbled streets. Small squads form around him, each man carrying what he can. One officer is gone, another unconscious. Command has shifted to the men who simply refuse to wait. Across the hedgerows, Corporal Rossi's unit spots German vehicles approaching. They are far too few in number to stop the armor in a straight fight, but ingenuity replaces numbers. They set up Molotov cocktails, rig hedgerow traps, and use what little firepower they have to delay the enemy. Minutes stretch into hours. Every second gained is precious. Back at the command post, Eisenhower studies reports of scattered landings. "How can chaos become success?" he murmurs. The generals exchange grim looks. But slowly, pieces of intelligence begin to trickle in. Isolated groups of paratroopers are holding key crossings. Not the full brigade, not by any plan, just fragments of determined men. One bridge near Lafayette is under siege. 3 men, armed with rifles and a single machine gun, hold off a German patrol long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Their courage sparks something larger. Improvisation is replacing order. Fear is transforming into action. The sky begins to lighten. Dawn is hours away, but already the scattered squads of the 82nd and 101st Airborne are proving that chaos can be weaponized. The invasion that should have been doomed is, in small, miraculous increments, beginning to survive. And yet for every success, there is a question gnawing at the Allied command. How many bridges can these tiny groups hold before German armor sweeps them away completely? By the early hours of June 6th, the scattered paratroopers begin to coalesce, not as regiments or battalions, but as clusters of men led by sergeants, corporals, and even privates thrust into command. You can almost hear the whispered calculations. We're outnumbered, but we have the road. Sergeant Mike McCluskey surveys a narrow stone bridge outside Cairnton. 10 men, half of them wounded, crouch in foxholes and behind hedgerows. German reconnaissance vehicles are approaching, engines growling through the mist. McCluskey counts the enemy silently, 2 armored cars, a squad of infantry, not much if they act fast. He signals his men forward. Rifles crack, Molotovs fly, the enemy halts. Confused, disoriented, unable to understand how such a small group is holding the crossing, they pull back. In another sector, Corporal James O'Connor leads a dozen men through the flooded fields toward a bridge over the Murderate River. Orders are improvised, timed with the flicker of dawn light. Each man carries what he can: machine guns, explosives, even bicycles converted into stretchers for the wounded. Every decision is life or death, every step a gamble. The unexpected heroism of these junior leaders begins to ripple across the battlefield. Lieutenant Winters reconnects with a fragment of his company and realizes that these fragmented units, though disorganized, are hitting German positions at precisely the points that matter most. Bridges, crossroads, and key roads, the arteries of Normandy, are being held by men who weren't supposed to have command. Back in the Allied command post, Eisenhower is receiving a new wave of reports. Initially, they were fragmented and confusing. Units scattered, no communication, heavy losses. But now the narrative shifts. Small groups have taken bridges, blocked German reinforcements, and delayed armored counterattacks. The impossible is happening. The scattered paratroopers are shaping the battlefield. The tension in the command room is palpable. Some officers are still unconvinced. "How can so few men make a difference?" whispers Major General Matthew Ridgway. But Eisenhower already sees the pattern. Chaos has become a weapon. Improvisation has become strategy. And a new form of warfare, led by the courage and initiative of junior leaders, is redefining the D-Day invasion. And yet, while small victories mount, one grim question remains. Can these fragments of the 82nd and 101st hold the bridges long enough for reinforcements to arrive? Or will the German counterattacks crush them before dawn? The first light of dawn cuts through the mist over Normandy. The landscape is a patchwork of hedgerows, flooded fields, and shattered villages. You can hear the distant thrum of German engines, the crack of rifles, and the occasional scream carried by the wind. Every bridge now feels like the hinge upon which the entire invasion swings. Sergeant McCluskey's men grip their rifles tighter. Their foxholes are shallow, their ammunition limited, but morale is high. Every German patrol that attempts to cross the bridge is repelled. Smoke curls over the stone arches as improvised explosives and well-aimed gunfire halt the enemy's advance. The odds are overwhelming, but the Americans refuse to yield. Across the countryside, Corporal O'Connor and his dozen men have captured another key crossing over the Murderate River. They've lost some men, and the exhausted soldiers' faces are streaked with mud and blood. But each man knows that what they are holding could mean the difference between success and catastrophe on Utah Beach. Improvisation, courage, and sheer stubbornness have replaced the formal chain of command. Lieutenant Winters rallies his scattered company, now reduced to half strength. Using hedgerows and terrain, he sets up ambushes that confuse and slow the German response. Every small victory compounds, roads are blocked, villages secured, and reinforcements delayed. It's no longer about following the plan. It's about adapting faster than the enemy can respond. Back in the Allied command post, Eisenhower watches as reports flood in. Initial chaos is now transforming into a mosaic of unexpected triumphs. They're actually holding, he murmurs, almost in disbelief. The scattered paratroopers, so far off target, are rewriting the course of Operation Overlord. Yet the tension is far from over. For every bridge held, a new threat looms. German panzer units are being mobilized, and communications are still patchy. Eisenhower can only hope that these improvising soldiers can hold long enough for the full weight of the invasion to land on the beaches and push inland. And then across the Murderate River, something unexpected happens, something that will change the battle before reinforcements even arrive. The sun rises higher, burning away the morning fog, revealing the full scale of the chaos below. You can see the scattered paratroopers moving through fields and orchards, hedgerows filled with smoke and the remnants of firefights. Small units have become pockets of resistance, defying both geography and expectation. Sergeant McCluskey's bridge has held against repeated German probes. Ammunition is running low. Men are bleeding, shaking, but their resolve does not falter. One soldier whispers, "If we fall here, the beachheads fall." McCluskey nods, his jaw tight. Every decision now is measured against the impossible stakes of the entire invasion. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Winters and his improvised command move silently along the Murderate. They discover another group of paratroopers pinned down in a farmyard. Without hesitation, Winters coordinates a flanking maneuver with the few men he has, catching the Germans off guard. The assault is quick, brutal, and effective. Another bridge, another crossing secured. Word spreads through the German lines. Bridges that should have been easy to take are fortified by scattered Americans. Confusion reigns. Officers argue, orders are delayed, and every attempt to push forward is met with unexpected resistance. The Allies have turned a botched drop into a nightmare for the German command. Back at Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower leans over a map, tracing the bridges and roadways now held by scattered airborne units. The realization hits him with chilling clarity. These small groups, these fragments of brigades, have done more than survive. They have shaped the battlefield. The invasion that might have faltered is gaining momentum, not because of perfect execution, but because of improvisation, courage, and leadership at the smallest levels. The first waves of reinforcements are approaching, guided by the men who refuse to wait for orders. Yet even as the bridges are held and the Germans hesitate, the question lingers in every command tent, every hedgerow, and every foxhole. How much longer can a handful of soldiers withstand the onslaught of seasoned enemy units determined to reclaim Normandy? And then from the horizon a column of German armor appears, massive, inevitable, and heading straight for one of the key bridges. The paratroopers prepare to make a stand that will define the fate of the invasion. The distant rumble grows louder, echoing across the fields and hedgerows. You can almost feel the vibrations through the soles of your boots. German Panzer IVs and Tiger tanks are advancing, their silhouettes dark against the rising sun. Every paratrooper knows what's coming. This isn't a skirmish. This is survival. Sergeant McCluskey crouches behind a crumbling wall, surveying the approaching armor. His machine gun is nearly empty. He signals to the men, "Every shot counts. Hold them until the reinforcements arrive." Molotov cocktails are readied, satchel charges primed, and rifles gripped with trembling determination. Corporal O'Connor's men are in a similar predicament on the Murderate Bridge. They've improvised anti-tank traps with what little explosives they could scavenge, and hedgerows are lined with concealed soldiers. They cannot stop a full panzer column, but they can delay it. They can bleed it. They can buy hours. The first tanks roar into range. Bullets ping uselessly off armor. McCluskey's men duck and fire at the weak points. Vision slits, engine grills, tracks. One Molotov hits a Panzer's rear, flames licking across steel, forcing it to halt. The Germans respond with rapid machine gun fire, shaking hedgerows and sending men sprawling. Some soldiers fall. Some rise again, bloodied but unbroken. The chaos of the night has hardened them. Every second they hold is measured in lives saved, in beachheads reinforced, in the survival of the invasion. From the command post, Eisenhower watches maps and reports come alive with these desperate engagements. He clenches his jaw. These men, scattered, off target, they might just succeed, he mutters. A mixture of disbelief and awe washes over him. The human spirit in fragments is defying logic, plan, and probability. And as the tanks begin to breach one side of the bridge, McCluskey makes a decision that will either turn the tide or doom the men forever. Sergeant McCluskey grits his teeth, glancing at the few men left standing. Smoke curls around the hedgerows, mingling with the morning fog. He knows there's no time to wait for orders. Every second counts. The Panzers are nearly on top of them, engines growling, treads tearing up the soft earth. He yells, "Fall back, but hold fire until they're at the center of the bridge." The men obey instinctively, moving in disciplined chaos. Then, as the lead tank crosses the bridge, a well-placed satchel charge explodes beneath its tracks. Steel shudders, fire roars, and the first Panzer halts. The rest hesitate, unsure. The Americans seize the moment, raining bullets and grenades from the hedgerows. Across the Murderette, Corporal O'Connor's unit has set their final trap. One tank triggers an explosive hidden in the flooded ditch beside the bridge. It flips, skids into the water, blocking the road for others. German infantry scramble, caught between terrain, fire, and the unpredictability of scattered men who refuse to surrender. The tide begins to shift. What seemed impossible, holding strategic bridges against superior numbers and armor, becomes reality. Every small decision, every split-second improvisation, compounds into a larger victory. The scattered paratroopers, once isolated and disoriented, have become the linchpins of the D-Day invasion. Back at Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower stares at the reports, disbelief etched on his face. "These men, they weren't supposed to hold," he whispers. "And yet they have, against everything, against all odds they have." For the first time that night, a sense of hope replaces the tension, though danger still looms. The first reinforcements from the beaches are visible in the distance, tanks rumbling along the roads McCluskey and O'Connor's men have defended so fiercely. The paratroopers have bought just enough time, but the battle is not yet over. One final threat remains. German forces are regrouping, and a counterattack could still strike with devastating force. And as the sun climbs higher, glinting off wet steel and shattered bridges, the men prepare for what could be the defining engagement of the morning. The distant rumble of Allied tanks grows louder, rolling over the dirt roads that wind through the Normandy countryside. Dust rises in the sunlight, mingling with smoke from the burning German armor. You can almost feel the relief in the paratroopers' hearts, though their exhaustion is etched deep into every face. Sergeant McCluskey watches the approaching Shermans and half-tracks, nodding to his men. They've held the bridge against impossible odds, scattered, disoriented, and outnumbered, and now the full weight of the invasion is arriving to solidify their effort. Each tank that appears is a lifeline, a reinforcement, a signal that their sacrifice was not in vain. Lieutenant Winters and Corporal O'Connor's units link up with incoming forces, coordinating artillery and anti-tank support with precision born from desperation. The bridges they've defended are now reinforced, the roads secured. The paratroopers' scattered courage has become the foundation for the Allied advance inland. Eisenhower receives the final reports, his face a mixture of awe and disbelief. The paratroopers, thrown miles off target, have done what generals in war rooms thought impossible. They improvised, they adapted, they fought, and they held the key to victory. As the tanks roll past the bridges, the Germans are forced to retreat, stunned by the tenacity of these small, determined units. The nightmare of D-Day night, the chaos, the lost men, the missed drop zones, has been transformed into a story of resilience, ingenuity, and courage. And while the paratroopers are finally reinforced, everyone knows this is only the beginning. The inland fight will be brutal, the cost high. But one truth has been written into the history of Normandy forever. Even scattered, lost, and outnumbered, soldiers who refuse to give up can change the course of a war. In the calm after the first waves, Eisenhower stands over a sprawling map of Normandy, pensively tracing the routes of the paratroopers. Reports lie in piles around him, each describing fragmented units, lost radios, and yet, miraculously, key bridges secured. He leans closer, reading the words again. Scattered miles off target, bridges held, enemy delayed. For a moment, disbelief silences him. How could scattered groups acting without command achieve what coordinated regiments might have failed to do? His mind races, piecing together the sequence. Sergeants improvising tactics, corporals rallying squads, privates taking initiative. This is not just luck. It is courage, ingenuity, leadership from the most unexpected places. He whispers almost to himself, This is why D-Day can succeed. The strategy on paper, the months of planning, the beaches, the naval bombardments, is only one layer. The other layer is human will, raw and unpredictable, capable of defying orders, geography, and even probability itself. Around him, his generals nod slowly, some still skeptical, others stunned into admiration. In that room, the scope of what just occurred begins to sink in. The invasion is alive not just because of ships or artillery, but because men lost in the dark took initiative, held bridges, and denied the enemy the opportunity to counterattack. And yet, Eisenhower knows, even in this moment of awe, that the war is far from over. These acts of bravery have secured the foothold, but Normandy will bleed, and victory will demand more courage, more improvisation, and more men willing to step into chaos and turn it into triumph. A quiet realization settles over him. The smallest acts, by those the world barely notices, can change the tide of history. The sun climbs high over Normandy, bathing the shattered countryside in pale light. Bridges that should have fallen lie intact. Roads that should have been overrun are now secure. You can almost hear the faint echo of the paratroopers' courage lingering in the morning air. Sergeant McCluskey wipes the grime and blood from his face, his hands shaking but resolute. Around him, the men who were once scattered, terrified, and alone begin to regroup. Some laugh nervously. Some stare in disbelief at what they've survived. Every bridge held, every checkpoint secured, is a testament to improvisation, to courage, to the refusal to accept defeat. Lieutenant Winters and Corporal O'Connor exchanged nods with incoming reinforcements. They had landed miles off target, separated from their units, surrounded by chaos, but they adapted. They made choices in darkness that changed the course of the invasion. Every map, every plan, every order had assumed precision, but what mattered most was initiative, human will, determination. Back at Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower exhales slowly. He finally allows himself a smile, not of relief but of awe. He now understands the truth. The success of D-Day night was not just in the ships that crossed the channel or the troops storming the beaches, but in the fragmented, improvising paratroopers who seized bridges against impossible odds. The invasion, chaotic and messy, had survived, and even thrived because of them. The Normandy campaign had begun, and while the battle ahead would be brutal, the story of the night when scattered men took every bridge would echo through history. A moment when courage overcame chaos, and initiative outweighed expectation. A single truth shines through the fog and gunfire of that night. Even lost, even disoriented, even outnumbered, men who refuse to yield can change the course of a war.